But one of the things that the research seems to bear out is that we should not be focused on losing weight. What we should be focused on is gaining muscle. Muscle is an organ all in itself. So muscle it secretes hormones, it regulates hormones, it burns dietary fat. So sugar can't do that. I mean, fat can't do that. Muscle can. And it really doesn't take that much to build muscle. I know you built your muscle by resistance of dancing. Hey, welcome to the Naked Doctor Show. I'm Dr. Tammy.
I'm Melody, the nurse practitioner.
We have a fun show for you today. We term it as the anti-aging sometimes, and then people are like, what the heck does that mean?
Right.
And I think it's fascinating when we talk about aging as a process. Aging is really a disease. And all the other diseases that we think of that come with aging, it's like chicken or the egg, aging is a disease, and then everything else starts crumbling. And so when we talk about biological age, I think that's fascinating, and the things that we can do to improve not just our longevity, but how we feel in the aging process. And so our little teaser is that we want you to stay to the end because it's really good information, and we're going to share 3 things with you right away that you can start doing to make a difference in that.
Yes, and your age in years doesn't have to mean that you feel that old, so to speak, all the time. The biological age, if you take care of yourself, if you do what you need to do to keep your body functioning the way that it needs to function, then you're going to feel a lot younger than what the clock says.
Mm-hmm. And that's what it's all about, too. And, it's interesting. I've read some research about the outside of your body shows the aging of your inside. And it's kind of like the rings on the tree. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at someone and they look old, that's a measurement of the organs and the tissues and everything below, because as those things the DNA starts to crumble and fall apart, it's happening on the outside. And we want to think it's happening faster on the outside because of sun damage and things like that. But it is a cellular, all our cells talk to each other. So it's a cellular process. So some people are like, why do you work so hard to look young? We're doing it from the inside out. Mm-hmm. We're working so hard to look young, to be young.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the things that you can do to take care of your body by extension will make you look younger in the long run, because, a lot of things like muscle tone, skin tone, the type of things that you eat and drink and put in your body make a huge difference inside and out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're starting to understand that genetics are one thing, but then there's epigenetics too, and that is the environment. And this is interesting because a lot of people want to blame genetics for things, and yes, absolutely, there are a lot of things that genetics do dictate, but really the epigenetics, they say, make up about 80% of that. And so what are epigenetics? It's everything around your genetics. So everything that you do, like you say, from what you put in your mouth to what you put on your skin, to where you live, to the environments, people who live where it's really dry, that's a whole cellular thing, and dehydration. Yeah. Hydrating the cells is super important. So there's a lot of different factors to look at. And what we do is really look at functional medicine. And so we're going to explain a little bit what that is too, because you can actually measure these things. So we're going to talk a little more about that when we come back with the Naked Doctor. We'll see you in just a minute.
When I came back to see Dr. Tammy in January, because of the month I had the month of December, we were just having a discussion and what I might be able to do. And I said, I'm just going to be honest with you. I've made an appointment tomorrow to go, check into this stem cell research. And she said, well, we do that here. And it was a no-brainer for me because I already had a relationship with her and trust her. And so that was when we decided to try the treatments, and I signed up for the 3-month program, and I've just been totally pleased with the results that I've had, because I've not gone back to that where I was just in such excruciating pain. And we've made great progress. Before we started the program, I told her I could fall asleep being asleep. I was just so run down, tired. I was depressed all the time. And I just find myself not having those battles like I was, where there was a constant battle. My conditions are just so extreme that the improvements that I've made have kept me from feeling like the best result for me is just death. And to me, that's been the God sent blessing that Dr. Tammy has given me, is that I don't feel that way. And to me, that's worth every penny that I've spent. And I can't say enough about this lady and her staff and what they've done for me.
Welcome back to Naked Doctor. I'm Dr. Tammy.
I'm Melody, the nurse practitioner.
We're having a fun conversation, and it really is at the bottom of everything that we do. So from the bottom up with what we call anti-aging and biological age. And I think it's fascinating because we're getting a lot of buzz nowadays from people that they call biohackers. And it's just this big thing. There's a guy, I actually interviewed him one time for a podcast. His name's Dave Asprey, and he is the Bulletproof Coffee guy. So you can look up that podcast if you want. But he's so fascinating. And like at the time, this was like 5 years ago, but at the time he was super cutting edge. Mm-hmm. And when I did the podcast with him, he was saying some very controversial things from like smart drugs. And in that category of smart drugs, I'm not saying do this, but in that category of smart drugs was actually things like microdosing LSD and how caffeine and nicotine and all that can play in as far as like smart drugs. And then there are things like, we use things like prescription metformin. We usually think of that for diabetes, but there's a longevity with insulin and insulin regulation as well. And a lot of disease comes from inflammation when we talk about this process. And so when we talk about inflammation, insulin and blood sugar utilization is huge. And one of the big things is dementia and Alzheimer's. And I have a family history of that, so that's concerning. But they call that a type 3 diabetes or a sugar utilization in the brain. Mm-hmm. So again, it's not just about aging, but it's aging well and what's your quality of life if you have an issue that's a disease process that's debilitating.
Exactly. Well, and it's about adding life to the years that you have instead of just adding years to your life. Who wants to live to be 100 if you're just
I love that.
Like,
say it again. Say it again. That's really important.
We want to add life to your years as opposed to just adding years to your life, because we want you to function well. We want you to enjoy the time that you have, to be able to go out and do all the things that give you joy and make you happy. And you can't really do that if you're sitting there with a brain full of sugar and feeling like, well, all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's tons of studies too with things like intermittent fasting. Mm-hmm. And people are like, well, why would intermittent fasting cause longevity or health in general? And part of that is, you don't want to get diabetes because then you start, amputations and heart disease and all that stuff. But part of what that intermittent fasting does is it closes the window. So people are like, well, what is that? What is fasting? Well, biblical, we think of fasting as like
40
weeks
days
at a
in the
time.
desert.
Yeah, and like me with my issues from the past, my hormone issues and insulin regulation issues, one of the things that I don't do well in this world, there are lots of them, but it's fasting. Yeah, I can get pretty grumpy when I'm hungry. Hangry. So the best kind of fasting for me is to close my eating window. And that's really easy for me to do because I'm not hungry in the mornings when I wake up. And that's because of cortisol issues that, some people have. And then really, I don't eat late in the evening. I might have a protein snack before I go to bed. So my meals are squished down to what we eat at lunch and then, maybe a light dinner or something. Right. So when we talk intermittent fasting, that's just closing that window of when you're eating.
Well, and kind of the opposite of intermittent fasting would be something called the sumo wrestler diet. Do you know how sumo wrestlers get so big?
No.
It's because of the way that they eat. So they go all day long and they train and they do all the stuff that they need to do, but then they have this massive meal right before they go to bed. And what happens to all those calories? They don't go anywhere. You're not utilizing that energy, so it all turns into mass, right? Fluff, fat. So Intermittent fasting is kind of the opposite of that, right? You're eating your food during a certain window of time period during the day when you're going to be active, when you're going to be burning those calories, when you're going to be interacting with people and moving around. And it's really a healthier way to do things as opposed to, I got home from work at 6 and I don't have dinner ready until 8 or 9 and I'm just going to shove all this food in my mouth and then go to sleep.
Yeah, not a good way to do it. And, one of the interesting things, too, is that, in fact, I just read some research and, listened to some podcasts about muscle. And building muscle is one of the most important things you can do, not to mention just when you get elderly, falling and trying to get up. So if you're heavy, that's an issue. But one of the things that the research seems to bear out is that we should not be focused on losing weight. What we should be focused on is gaining muscle. And muscle really is heavier than fat. I mean, people want to get on the scale, and I always tell people to get one of those impedance scales so you can actually see the difference between body fat and body water. Just a simple scale you can get on Amazon. But the more muscle we build, muscle is an organ all in itself. So muscle it creates hormones, it regulates hormones, it burns dietary fat. So sugar can't do that. I mean, fat can't do that. Muscle can. And it really doesn't take that much to build muscle. I mean, my routine is actually pretty simple. I know you built your muscle by resistance of dancing, which I love. So, but, it can be just as simple as getting some small free weights, 3 pounds, 5 pounds, bands. Bands are really good if you don't want to strain yourself lifting weight.
Right. And if there were one thing for everybody, there would only be one thing. Right. So the trick is to find the thing that doesn't feel so much like exercise for you. Because if you hate running on the treadmill, every single time you look at that treadmill, you're going to think, ugh. But if you choose an activity that brings you joy, such as pickleball, super popular right now, right? There are pickleball leagues all over the place. It's not super duper hard, but it's still very active, especially for cardiovascular and movement and everything. If you can do something that you enjoy, then when you think about it, you're going to be excited to go do it. And you're going to be able to do it for an hour at a time without feeling completely worn out because it's something you love to do. For me, it happens to be dancing. But for other people, there's all kinds of different things: pickleball, biking, hiking, swimming, aerobics, Zumba, whatever.
Most of mine is focused. I do intermittent. Everything seems to be intermittent, and it kind of goes back to our ancestors. They didn't have food all the time, and they weren't chasing prey or being chased by an animal or anything. And so they had these windows of eating. Food wasn't available all the time. Our bodies are biologically made, hormonally primitive chemicals made to have that intermittent, not just all day long, just grazing. And so if you can do those intermittent bursts, it creates an effect in your hormones that actually will regulate your insulin. And bodybuilders have known this for years because what they do is they carb load before they lift weights and train because it's going to push that glucose utilization into the muscle to do what it's supposed to do. So I always say, if you're going to eat sugar, carbs are just complex sugars that get broken down. But if you're going to eat a lot of sugar, get up and move afterward. Just take a walk or something. You've got to be able to utilize that sugar. But if you're doing those small bursts, they've actually done lots of studies to show that, in fact, they put people in the lab with all the connections and checking their hormones every 30 minutes. That as far as that glucose utilization goes, that's the most powerful way to, if you're going to do an aerobic type of thing, that you're actually using both your anaerobic, meaning not really respirating those muscles. It's a harder train than if you are just doing aerobic, which aerobic's great, but you have to have that sort of those bursts to bring that into.
You need the combination. And if you exercise hard enough to where your muscles are sore the next day, that soreness is actually your muscles rebuilding themselves, repairing that damage that you did when you were exercising. But what that's doing is burning fat while you're just sitting there, right? So if you get a really, really great workout and the next day you're kind of sore, you're burning fat while you're sitting there. It's getting the workout on the front end. That's the hard part sometimes, right?
Yeah. And not injuring yourself, of course. You don't want to lift too heavy, and you want to build up to that. But, as far as our focus on building muscle, which weighs a little more, more than losing fat, just kind of a protein forward kind of diet, because that protein and those building blocks, those amino acids, help build that muscle. And so there's tons of studies to show that our longevity is directly related to the amount of muscle we have. So when we come back, we're going to talk about hormones, because of course that's our jam. We do that all day long. And the effect of hormones and testosterone, which both boys and girls have, the effect of those hormones and testosterone on that muscle building, and how important it is and how much easier it can make things for you. So we'll be right back.
Congestive heart failure, I have Parkinson's, COPD, GERD, lymphedema, thyroid. I usually have the list in front of me. I even had gingivitis, but don't have that no more. It's went away. When Dr. Tammy saw my medical records and saw the page full of drugs that I was taking for all my conditions, she said she could pretty well take care of everything that I had going on with me. And I've already been studying those stem cells for a long time. So I decided at that point in my life that I was on walking cane, I was falling and hurting myself, and tremors, couldn't talk very good. I had the masked face and drooling, the whole 9 yards. Since then, all that has subsided since my first stem cell treatment. I had 12 specialists I was going to. I had all these specialists, and all they kept doing was pushing more drugs down me. And the drugs cause enough problems as it is. And some of the Parkinson's medicine I was on is horrible. I'll never take it. That's why I was to a point. Life wasn't worth living if I was going to keep going downhill, because I'm not going to take that stuff that messes with the chemicals in my brain. That's one reason why I decided, to go ahead and, hey, what have I got to lose? I'm going to try the stem cells. And I don't regret it one iota. I now feel like I've got my life back. Well, I was 45 pounds heavier than I am now. My balance was bad. My dementia was getting worse and worse. I couldn't remember from one second to the next. The Parkinson's symptoms had picked up on me and was really starting to accelerate. But it has relieved all that. I have no pain like that, because that's muscle contractions. The excessive salavas went away. My hearing's actually improved. I got my smell and taste back, which I had lost I haven't had for 15 years. And when it comes back, it's like being born again. It's like for the first time I'm able to smell something again and see whatever. And it's been remarkable in that instance, The main symptoms of tremors are pretty well subsided. It's like, I feel like what it was 15, 20 years ago, when they were treating me for a nerve disorder. And it was only just a shaking in this one hand, on my left hand. And that's kind of where I feel like I'm back at. And so many of the symptoms, I'm on Parkinson's website, so patients like me, the Parkinson's team, and I've got to where I just started telling people about it, because stem cells has been a miracle to me. To me, she's been very compassionate, very, very caring, always treats me great, She gives me encouragement. I really think that she has a lot. She understands a lot of stuff that I'd been studying about natural take natural stuff instead of pharmaceutical, because I don't care. I'm not cutting pharmaceutical completely, but most everything you take might cure what you got, but it causes something else. And so I've tried to do nothing but natural stuff. But she's been a miracle for me. She gave me my life back, and that's what I told her. I said, I went from 12 specialists down to one doctor now, and you're it.
Welcome back to The Naked Doctor. I'm Dr. Tammy.
I'm Melody, the nurse practitioner.
And we are talking about getting old, or not getting old, or not feeling old.
Aging gracefully.
Aging gracefully.
Right?
Yes.
Looking the way that you feel on the inside and feeling good on the inside to match it.
Yes. You know, it's funny because I just had a birthday, my 55, big 5'5".
Happy birthday!
I never heard people call it 2 nickels. I thought that was kind of cute. But I really strive to take care of myself because the family history I have of a heart disease and cancer and Alzheimer's, I mean, I'm like, it's coming at me from all angles. And my dad died of a heart attack when he was 55, but he had had cancer for about 2 years before that. So it's like, holy crap, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. So I think one of the interesting things as you look at that is to really be mindful. And so we do a lot of genetic testing in our office, and we can look at lots of different things. But I always say we're not doing it because we're trying to scare you. We're trying to increase your awareness.
Mm-hmm. Well, and once you have that knowledge, it gives you the power to be able to control your symptoms a little bit more. So if you really know what's going on and how things affect the way that you happen to be built, then you can make better choices to help your body function better.
Yeah, it's nuts kind of knowing too. I say never do a test that you're not going to be willing to make a change for, right? You wouldn't do an MRI of your back if you weren't willing to do some intervention, and sometimes that's even surgery if it's bad enough. So why are you going to do a test if you're not going to have some influence on how you can change a behavior or change something that you're doing, or hormones, or of course we have to get into that a little bit. But genetics are interesting because there's a process called methylation, big, techie term, and there are some defects. And I think of it like a record. People who are old enough to know what vinyl records are.
They're coming back. They're coming back.
I thought I saw that somewhere. So when you look at a record, it plays a song, and there's actually something called a DNA song, and we don't really have a lot of time to go into that, but that's fascinating. But what happens is the grooves on the record that play can get scratched. And the scratching is kind of just a factor of playing that record a lot. Or
if you don't play records and the music when you hear on the turntables, that's a record.
Yeah.
They're scratching.
Yeah, they're scratching. And so those are all what we call SNPs that we can look for. And those methylation SNPs are what put us at that increased risk. Epigenetics, of course, our environment. But when you have those little scratches in the record, the song's not going to sound very good. So there's so many things that you can understand about the way your body methylates. So as I did my DNA, I do have several hits on my methylation pathways. And so what do? I take methylated supplements. So, I mean, it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm a sitting duck. What am I going to do? And, it's interesting because when my mom was in assisted living before she passed, they kept saying, like, she was the only one who was not progressing. All the other elderly females in the home over the course of like 2 years would get so bad they'd have to go to a nursing home, or they would really lose their cognition. And the only thing we really did different for my mom was progesterone at bedtime. She called it her sleep cream, and methylated vitamins. So that's really powerful to me, and I can really notice a difference when I don't take my methylated supplements.
Sure. Well, and people ask us all the time, what supplements should I take? And there's so much information out there. There are so many different supplements on the market. They're not regulated the same way that medications are in the United States, so you have to be very careful about your source when you're choosing a supplement. But doing a genetic test is a really, really good way to figure out exactly how your body is going to process certain supplements and which supplements are going to be the most beneficial for you.
There's lots of things too, like I can't even say vitamin D as a vitamin, because it's actually a hormone that helps you build a lot of other hormones. But, when you look at supplementation, it's really nice to check levels, especially of those fat-soluble vitamins, meaning that your body doesn't clear those as easily as water-soluble, that just you pee them out if you don't need them. But like we check vitamin D levels, and you can have your doctor, you can ask for that, but vitamin D is huge for your immune system as well as a lot of your hormone processes. And you can check B12 levels, and you can check vitamin C levels, and so you can see what you're deficient in. And so that's really nice to know. Genetics also help. This sounds like a genetic show, doesn't it? Well, actually, genetics are the basis of your aging, but genetics can be really helpful as well, because you can look for what we call scratches in the record for the way you metabolize vitamin D. And a lot of people are like, what vitamin D should I take? Because there's so many forms. And just kind of quick on that, you basically process vitamin D through your skin. And that's great, because people are like, well, I get sun. Well, sun damage, right? I get sun. But then we check their vitamin D levels and they're low. So if you check their genetic ability to process their vitamin D from the skin through the liver and through the kidneys, then you can get a better picture of, are you going to be deficient in that? And almost everybody's deficient in it. It's crazy. It's a thing. But yeah, am I going to be deficient in that? And how much do I need? And especially with cold and flu season and disease processes, vitamin D is huge. It's very important. If you look in the literature, it has a huge effect on
It
things.
helps your body be able to heal itself. And if you're super low on that, then you're going to be sick for a lot longer. You're going to have joint pain for a lot longer. And it's a fairly simple and readily available supplement. It's just knowing how to take it, when to take it, and making sure that your levels are appropriate.
Yeah, and you can't take too much, since
You
it is
can.
what we call a fat-soluble vitamin. So getting your levels checked can be really helpful. But I usually, as a rule of thumb, say 5,000 in the winter. That is, if you can convert through the skin, or 10,000 in the winter and 5,000 in the summer. So that's good. So all these shows go so fast. There's so much to talk about. Oh my gosh. But we promised you 3 things that you could really focus on right now to start making some changes in what's called the biological age. And there's some really fun stuff you can look up, like they call it the Horvath clock. And you can look at the different factors that cause aging. But, one of the things, get your hormone levels checked.
Absolutely.
Testosterone is huge. We always think hormones, we think estrogen, progesterone, but testosterone is used for building muscle, and we know that more muscle has more longevity associated with it. And then also changing your diet just a little bit, eating a little bit healthier, getting some supplements, and just focusing on the things that you can change and the easy things that you can do. They say it's simple, not easy, because we stay so busy in our lives, and I know, and us, we have busy practice and families and all that stuff. So, but, and taking the supplements, getting your hormones checked, building muscle, incorporating that intermittent fasting, intermittent fitness. I'm sorry, I wish I could say that you don't have to exercise, but, I would be really hurting you if I didn't say that.
That's true.
But it can be something fun like dancing. It can, be things that you love and enjoy and appreciate.
Yes.
So it's been a fast show today. We love you guys very much. We wish you the best for health and wellness and longevity. And we'll see you next time on The Naked Doctor.